heart and head work, the spirit work. So like, different people bring different things to the table. And I think one of the best things about the Minnesota Education Equity Partnership, MnEEP, is that we take an asset-based approach to education and equity and excellence in education. And so everyone has assets that they bring to the table. And not all of them are the same. So the more that we can tap into that asset-based mindset, skills, will, knowledge, the better outcome we're going to have for students, in this case, students in higher education, and communities, and more specifically, communities of color.
What at the very least, one of the things the institutions are not doing in that case is seeing you for who you are and properly assessing the gifts that you do have, the energy that you do have. And more important, well, not more, just as importantly, not challenging yourself as an institution than to stop trying to put you into our box where you're not ready, so you're in this box, and change how we interact, how we provide the opportunity for accessing, developing, knowledge.
For me, I come kind of into the space from an indigenous perspective. And so, I think of it in rings. And Dr. Linda Tuhiwai-Smith from the University of Waikato in New Zealand talks about a decolonized methodology. And part of that framework involves nested rings. And so the outer ring for indigenous peoples, she believes, involves survival. The next ring is healing. So once we get beyond survival, we have to talk about how we heal together. And then the next is recovery. So recovering from that healing place. And then the last ring, the inner ring, is self-determinism. So that each of us, and I guess my bias is that we're all kind of indigenous in some way or another, just irrespective of skin color. Sure. We all come from an indigenous tribe, if you go far back enough. That we all have hopes and dreams for ourselves and for our families and our children and our children's children, and that it's really important that we be able to self-determine what those futures need to look
like. Some of the council members had brought up how, things have been just happening the same way, and an important switch and change that needs to happen is providing anti-racist training and opportunities for engagement across an institution, so from faculty, staff, any individual on campus that is interacting with students. Because what we were hearing from students and those who are on the council was that students come to an institution, to higher ed, and don't feel that staff and faculty are ready for them in terms of showing anti-racist practices. So that was a big area of focus in ensuring that there is funding so that institutions can continue to engage in that. So often institutions talk about, yes, we want to be anti-racist, or we are anti-racist, without actually changing the ways that they're preparing their staff.
This is a particular moment, right, in higher education, as there have been, right, and I think about the institution, my institution, right, the Memorial Hall takeover, right. There are particular moments that higher education and specifically institutions must respond to a call to action, right. And that, I think, is undeniable in this moment, right? So when I think about the goal, that is representation at the highest levels of the higher education administrative structure. We can no longer, right, continue to justify why the diversity only exists at the lowest ranks of higher education structures. We must be willing, right, to hold institutions accountable to their hiring practice, right? And that is important when we think about faculty and representation in the classroom, right? And then the other piece is we have to prepare all students, right? Multicultural students and students who are in the majority, right, to meet a changing world, not only in global perspective, political perspective, but in actual racial, cultural representation. And now, right, in a reality that is healing, right, from what has been destructive in our economy, destructive in our social agreement and contracts, right? And this is a moment where institutions are really going to have to ask themselves, where do we in fact want to be? What does this compact look like when it is actualized? And knowing that we never really get there, right? This is another wave of an ongoing conversation that speaks to social justice, because we know it is both a goal and a process, and this is another part of the process.
One, it sounds almost simple, but it's true. One is that those systems, all our social systems, need to be populated by the people that it's serving. They need to reflect, who these communities are, right? We need to do lots of things. We meeting systems, and people work in them, need to educate ourselves, particularly around race and racism, and understand how it deconstructs communities, how it deconstructs individuals, and then be able to do the analysis internally of how we're part of that. It has to start with that internal, look and reflection, and honest, commitment to, disassemble, the construct, at least, beginning the psychological, even spiritual constructs that exist, inside our social institutions.